Glasses. Oh, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Senate Transportation. Would you please join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? Senator Fenton, will you do the honors? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you so much. We will now open the hearing on House Bill 1032. And the chair will call Representative Santon. Thank you. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Senate Transportation Committee. I am Representative Santon Nastasso, representing the towns of Rindge, Jaffrey, and Dublin. Today, I'm introducing House Bill 1032. This bill changes the current title exemption period for vehicle registration from vehicles older than the year 2000 to a dynamic one that encompasses vehicles 20 years or older. People often lose their titles to their vehicles for various reasons, and they're unaware of their procedures to obtain a duplicate title, while others are deterred by the complexity and costs involved. Today, the market is rife with vehicles listed as no title, which significantly diminishes their value and marketability. These vehicles are often sold for fractions of their potential value, except for those of the year 99 model or older, which currently benefit from title exemption. This discrepancy creates a market distortion, whereas individuals are hesitant to engage with the system and secure titles for their newly purchased vehicles. They recognize the difficulty and often opt to invest in a more comparable vehicle that either possesses a title or is older than the year 2000. This disables capital in New Hampshire that otherwise could be put to productive use. In considering the necessity of titles for older vehicles, for cases of fraud or theft, it's important to recognize the state's existing mechanisms for tracking vehicle ownership. Vehicles that are 20 years or older, the state already possesses historical record of ownership through previous registrations. These records include information about the past owners, their addresses, and other pertinent details. In the instances of suspected fraud or theft, authorities could readily access these records to ascertain the vehicle's ownership history and investigate any discrepancies. This system of retaining and accessing past registration data provides a robust safety net, diminishing the need for titles as a protective measure against fraud or theft for these older, lower value vehicles. The most useful function of a title is to collateralize debt for an auto loan. 20 years is more than enough time for a lien holder to get paid for a car, being that the typical auto loan is about 6 years, and a 20-year-old vehicle isn't even valuable collateral. Even still, if someone sells a car that still has a lien on it and conceals that fact to the buyer, the seller's just committing fraud, and it'd be easy for the bank to show ownership since they still hold title. But in this case, the stakes are so low compared to like a 2-year-old vehicle, where requiring a title for registration provides value. By extending the exemption to titles to a rolling year, we increase the wealth of New Hampshire by allowing cars that otherwise would be worthless to be registered. We also make cars cheaper to the public by increasing the total supply of cars, giving New Hampshire citizens the ability to purchase cars with missing paperwork out of state at bargain prices like Massachusetts that don't have any exemption period for titles and register them here. So cars that are pre-99 without titles are easier to register and transfer than newer ones. These newer cars have better safety features like emission controls. They have better safety features and things like better emission control. Most of the advanced airbag systems weren't developed until the early 2000s. Newer cars have better traction control, better ABS braking. But a knowledgeable buyer today making the choice between a 1999 minivan with no paperwork and a comparable 2004 minivan with no paperwork. It doesn't matter if the 99 has paperwork or not. The knowledgeable buyer would correctly choose the 99, even though it's a bigger polluter, has less safety features, because the 2004 is worthless since it cannot be registered. So in comparison, the FAA doesn't even issue titles. So if you buy a $5 million jet, you just send a bill of sale and a aircraft registration and application, and the FAA considers the copy of the application temporary registration until they can mail you a permanent one. So this process is much easier than trying to get a 2002 Kawasaki motorcycle in someone's barn with a market value of $75 registered in the state of New Hampshire. So my story that made this issue aware to me is I had a 2001 PT Cruiser. I sold it to someone that had the same car and was rebuilding it, so they wanted the parts, and we didn't even think about a title or any of this until he was done with his rebuild, and he wanted to bring the car to the junkyard. So that's a lot of times when this problem comes up. The junkyard can't take the car without a title unless it's exempt. So it took us about 2 months to get the title, and he paid for the stuff. But during the time, he was just stressed out, calling me at multiple times a week, like what's going on. And he was nervous because I think some people wouldn't help him get through this process. And he would basically, without my help, it would be nearly impossible for him to get rid of this car. So this is a common problem. And since the process is too burdensome or sometimes impossible, junk cars are getting stuck on property with no way to dispose of them. It could be that the owner's dead or not willing to help get a replacement title, or just other problems that come up with dealing with people. And these junk vehicles are eyesores and lower the quality of life for people living in the area. So at some point, we need to allow these vehicles to be transferable without title. So when I talk to people about this, everyone I talk to agrees we should have a rolling date. And the real process of dealing with this problem is to get a friend in Vermont, sell the car to the person in Vermont, have them register in Vermont and get a title, and then sell it back to you. And then you can register in New Hampshire or deal with it otherwise. And then some evidence to suggest the need for this change is real is when I put this bill in, completely independent and unknown to me, the same bill was put in, but with a 10-year exemption period instead of 20. So I actually introduced both of these bills into the House, and we thought that 10 years was probably a little bit too aggressive. 20 years is probably more reasonable. If you think of a 10-year-old car, 2014, that's still got quite a bit of value, probably a $5,000 car. And 20-year-old car is like, what, $300 car? So the bill passed House Transportation unanimously and then passed the House twice on consent. Our proposal to transition to a rolling exemption date is a transformative measure that will instantly enhance the value of numerous titleless cars, making them more marketable. It will prevent these vehicles from becoming abandoned relics rusting away in backyards across New Hampshire. It will add supply to the market to lower the price of used cars for low-income people at a time when costs are increasing. There's low risk of theft and fraud due to the low market value of these cars. And there's no reason to have all this capital rendered useless because of missing paperwork. So requiring a title for cars this old is just too onerous, and they should be exempt. Thank you for your time, and I'll take questions.
Are there any questions from the members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak on House Bill 1032? Please come forward.
Thank you. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Jennifer O'Leary. I'm the Title Bureau Administrator over at the Division of Motor Vehicles. I've been employed there for 21 years, focusing mainly on the vehicle record. There was a historical time in which the DMV had a rolling turnaround time for titles to be considering them exempt. Back when vehicles were considered of higher value at 2000, that law was changed by legislation. At this time, I just wanted to clarify a few things that were brought up in the original testimony. Duplicate titles are easily obtained through the Division of Motor Vehicles. The instructions in the application are right online. Our business practice is to have those turn around in a 3 to 5 day business time from the date of receipt at our office. That includes at any of your substations throughout the state. So if you were to walk into one of those offices, pay the $25, complete the application within 3 business days, we are processing that application and mailing that title out to the customer. It is easily obtained. In the case about the PT Cruiser, the individual that he sold it to is very lucky that he was willing to work with them and help them get that. He is correct in a sense that some sellers will not do that. But those records are easily obtained through our division. And I'm open to any questions pertaining to this if anyone has any.
Yes, please.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. You
Thank
were
you.
an expert on titles, it
Yes.
seems like. Any issues with it being a rolling date instead of setting it at that 2000?
No, the division does not see an issue with the rolling date of 20 years.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for your time.
So I will ask again, are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on House Bill 1032? Representative Walsh?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'll keep it brief. I wasn't going to speak to it. For the record, my name is Tom Walsh. I represent Merrimack 10, which are the towns of Hooksett and Dunbarton, and I serve as chair on the transportation in the House. I just wanted to reiterate my support for this. I believe I was here my freshman year when you changed it to the 2000, and I didn't understand it then. We had no opposition to this that I can remember in committee, and we're just doing it and recommending it for practical value, for practical reason. If you look at the title needs for financing for fraud and theft, the committee came to an agreement that after 20 years or so, the value of vehicles as such, that is probably not necessary, and it makes life easier for people that may lose their paperwork. So that was the reason we pushed it forward. And that is
Thank
all.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak on House Bill 1032? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 1032. And time is good. Okay. And we will open the hearing on House Bill 1202. Welcome, Representative. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Chairman Shardy and other senators. Appreciate the opportunity to be before you. I am here. I'm here to introduce House Bill 1202 FN as amended by the House, relative to the issue of permits for the alteration of driveways existing onto public ways. For the record, my name is Mark McConkey. I represent the good people of Carroll District 8 and am the chairman of Public Works and Highways. I was also, and I believe Chairman Alexander will be speaking to this, on the Special Committee on Housing. I was a member of that, also served with Chairman Walsh. And I don't want to take too much away from Representative Alexander, but part of that committee, which was brought forward by the Speaker of the House, was to speak with developers, to speak with potential homeowners, to find out what was holding up housing, and affordable developers spoke. And as I said, groups that were supporting housing were there. Time after time, we would hear that government red tape is what held back projects from being permitted, and time is money, as we all know. So one of the issues was driveway permits, which is what this addresses, which is why it came through Public Works and Highways. We had heard the Department of Transportation does an absolutely wonderful job throughout the entire state, but when there are pockets in denser areas, urban areas, that will cause an application to go on for weeks, if not months. We had started out with a larger perspective here for all development, and we had honed it back to only be for multifamily and housing developments. The ask here is that when an application comes in complete, that it will be reviewed within 30 days' time. If it's not issued within 30 days' time by the department, it will be considered official. this is similar to other departments, Department of Environmental Services, Subsurface, and others. And the timeline is important to keep activity moving forward. The Department of Transportation came forward and said if they were going to enact this legislation, they needed to hire as many as 4 individuals to handle that. We had a robust conversation in the House when it was disclosed that these types of housing projects are less than 1% of all applications that come before them. I do not doubt to move a schedule up will be burdensome. But I think for the residents of our state and the needs for housing, that this is solid legislation, and I would hope it meets favor from your committee.
Any questions? I have one.
Please.
I just had a question about the Department of Environmental Services, or if there is a wetland situation which could, hold it up with value and merit. So could you just respond to that for me with this? Thank you.
I don't know I have the right answer for you, but
Okay.
I'll tell you from my years of involvement
Okay.
with the Department of Environmental Services and my other businesses. There could always be a concern that will need to be addressed. And my hope is that those instances are minor, the number of times that happens. Those permits are regulated by time frames, I believe, unless it's an alteration of terrain, but if it's a wetlands permit, 45 and 90 days. My hope is that when this application's complete, that the Department of Transportation would then rule within 30 days. But I can't say for sure what the dynamics of that one case would be.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, the chair will now call Ben Frost. Oh, did you want, you want to go? Oh, yeah, you can come forward. We'll have Ben after. I was going on down the list here.
Yes, my apologies, I didn't sign up. But for the record, my name is Representative Alexander. I represent Hillsborough District 39, town of Goffstown. To give you a little history on this bill, Speaker created this House Special Committee on Housing at the beginning of the biennium to really tackle not the housing issue, like the silver bullet, but a housing issue. So we dealt with we spent a year listening to developers, planning board members, people from different counties, municipal association, members of the public, and we really tried to get to the bottom of what are small things that we can tackle in order to move the ball forward and make sure that we're providing affordable homes for people to live in and keys to home ownership. So HB 1202 came from that. It basically puts a reasonable timeline on residential permits being approved. As Chairman Conkey said, it was narrowed down, so it's about 1% of the applications. The bill originally referred to all driveway permits, but the House amended the language. The House also asked for the 4 new positions. As DOT indicated, they needed 4 new positions to comply with the bill. The House Finance deemed that was able to come out of the highway fund, as it's in surplus right now. So I really think that this is an issue of government efficiency. When a developer comes to the special committee and says, "Oh, I can tell you where things are held up," it's because DOT won't sign the driveway permit in time, or it just, time is money to them. It takes too much time for them to sign the permit. So all we're asking is it incentivizes DOT to work more collaboratively together with applicants, developers, property owners. But you would also support property rights by getting reasonable timelines in place. And to answer your question about that you asked Chairman McConkey, on page 1, line 15, there's language that says the department and the applicant may by mutual agreement extend any of the deadlines in this section. So that allows collaboration between the applicant and the department. And this 30-day timeline only starts when an application's complete, and DOT clearly outlines what's needed for the application. So they're allowed to reject an application for it not being complete, and then as soon as it's complete, it starts the 30-day timeline.
Okay.
So with that, I'm happy to answer questions, but Mr. Frost is here for support as well.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Now we'll see Ben Frost. Nice to see you, Ben.
Thank you, Senator. It's a pleasure to be before your committee. I'm Ben Frost. I'm the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Legal Officer of New Hampshire Housing. I'm here to speak in support of House Bill 1202 and encourage you to recommend it ought to pass. I don't want to belabor any of the points that have already been ably made by Chairs McConkey and Alexander. So I will focus on the other part of this bill, which deals with the local process. So, the Department of Transportation has the authority to issue permits on state highways. But when it comes to municipal highways, that same authority is delegated to the local planning board, which, and you see that in paragraph 5, starting on page line 17. So that's existing statute. And typically, a planning board will delegate that authority to its road agent or DPW director. But they do retain that authority as well. The question was when, in the drafting of this legislation and before the House Public Works and Highways Committee was, well, what planning boards are not staffed the way the Department of Transportation is. They don't have expert engineers ready to review plans, and it may take longer to do this. So in collaboration with the Municipal Association, we worked up this language here, starting on line 28 and extending through page 2, line 2, that says the timeline that is applicable to the Department of Transportation is not similarly applicable to a local planning board or its delegate. But the planning board has to establish what a reasonable timeline is, which will not be longer than 65 days. And that time period, 65 days, was chosen thoughtfully because it is the same period of time that a planning board has to review a plan, whether it's a site plan or a subdivision, once it has accepted it. That is the statutory deadline for planning board action. So this same deadline would apply here to a local planning board or its delegate in granting a local driveway permit. Again, we support this legislation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Senator Ward? Senator Gendros? I just have a little comment. So for clarification, it sounds like it keeps the local control, but to your point, a lot of the planning and zoning are comprised of volunteers in their local towns who really don't have the background knowledge to make these decisions. Is that correct?
Exactly so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair will call Elisa. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Alyssa Margolin. I serve as Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. I don't have the occasion to present to your committee very often, so I'll just briefly tell you about Housing Action. We're a statewide coalition of 80 organizations united to improve state and federal policy so everyone in New Hampshire has a place to call home. Our members are those who build, finance, and manage affordable housing properties, supportive housing properties, homeless service agencies, public housing agencies, and low-income family advocates. We're in support of this bill, and I wanted to share with you, our members are often have an ethos of collaboration with government. They are in the business of partnering with government to build affordable, much needed affordable housing for Granite Staters. They tend to have enormous patience for process and respect that. When we had the occasion to work on improving systems with the creation of the Special Committee on Housing, this seemed like low-hanging fruit. Our members reported that there were bottlenecks and that this would be helpful. And as you can see, there was that same ethos of collaboration and identifying, making sure that they had what they needed at our state agency and also a reasonableness for local participation as well. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. The chair will now call David. Hello, nice to see you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name's David Rodriguez, Assistant Commissioner and Chief Engineer for the Department of Transportation. The department shares everybody's concern with getting housing built and doing that as quickly and efficiently as possible. And we are here ready and willing to collaborate in that process in every way we can. We do, however, have concern with this particular bill and giving a 30-day time limit where if we are not able for whatever reason to issue the permit, then the applicant gets a permit automatically. We have concern for that. The reason we have the driveway permit process is not simply a perfunctory function where we get a permit, we stamp it approved and record it on a plan somewhere. The driveway permit process is intended to protect the safety and the mobility of the roadway network. For very simple driveways, single-family residences, and so forth, when an applicant comes with all the information that we need, including the deed history, any subdivision history, and so forth, we can typically turn those around in 45 days. And out of the 1,100 permits we do, 85% of them are turned around in about 45 days. There are applications that we get that are not so simple, however. Some of them don't come with the deed history and everything we need to review. So sometimes our people will wind up getting that information if the applicant isn't familiar with the registry of deeds or so forth. We try to help out and get that information and help them through the process so we can be successful. In addition to the deed research that goes into each application, we look at the safety characteristics of the roadway and the driveway entrance. We visit the site, check for site distance to make sure that minimum site distances are met so that the egress can be safe on and off the roadway for not only the new homeowner, but for the people on the road as well. For a simple permit for a single family residence, that's really just how complicated it is. Not bad at all. But when we get into multi-unit developments where we're talking significant traffic, and the traffic for multi-unit developments can be well over 100 vehicles per hour, we do what's called, or we require the developer to do what's called a traffic impact study, where they predict how many people are entering and exiting the property. They count the traffic on the roadway that these people will be interacting in, and they do different analyses to determine if turn lanes are warranted on the road or other things to the extreme, not typically for housing, but for other permits. Traffic signals may or may not be warranted. It may need to be installed by the developer and so forth. So at the end of the day, well, we understand the urgency. We're here willing to work with all the applicants. We're very concerned about a 30-day time limit and permits being automatically issued. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions? So you're concerned because, let's say it would bypass a traffic impact study for the developer in order to rush the process. That could be a safety concern. Am I understanding you correctly?
It wouldn't bypass the process. It's just not enough time in the process for the back and forth that's necessary to submit and review those traffic impact studies and any off-site mitigation plans that may need to be developed for improvements on the state roadway next to the development.
So if it wasn't 30 days, what would be acceptable?
Yeah. So we like being able to work that out, depending on the collaboration with the permittee. I will say 60 days would be a lot better than 30 days.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1202? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 1202. Let me see what time it is. Okay, that's great. Are you all set if I open the hearing? Okay. Thank you. We will now open the hearing on House Bill 1304. And who might be introducing the bill? I don't see someone here. Yes, Senator Ward, could you introduce the bill, please?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Transportation Committee. I'm Ruth Ward, Senator from the District 8th, and I'm introducing House Bill 1304. Representative Creighton is in California at this point. I know that, so I will introduce it for him. This bill modifies the procedure for registration of vessels by requiring the issuance and display of a boat fee decal for the payment of boat fees.
Thank you, Senator Ward. The chair will now call Tim Dunleavy.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, honorable members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Tim Dunleavy, and I come before you today from the Marine Patrol in support of this bill. To give you a little background, the Marine Patrol receives about $1.5 million annually from the Coast Guard on a federal recreational boating safety grant. There are conditions placed on the receipt of that grant that the Marine Patrol participate in certain federal programs as it relates to boat accident data, but also boat registration programs. It was discovered that New Hampshire is collecting fees for some of our in-state partners, that being DES, Fish and Game, and the Port Authority, as part of the overall boat registration fee, which, as it turns out, is in violation of federal law, leaving our Coast Guard grant in jeopardy should we not look for a remedy. As a result of a study committee on the side of the House, we came up with this program that allows us to separate those fees that are being collected illegally, according to federal law, and creating a second sticker for a boat, which will be required, if passed, will be required by the boater to display and pay the fees in a separate transaction. New Hampshire is one of about a dozen states now that are facing this same issue, and this seems to be the remedy that most states are following. It seems to be acceptable to the Coast Guard, where the fees are then separate. That all being said, I will say that the only increase that a boater is going to see with the boat registration fees will be a $3 increase, and that covers the cost of the second decal that's issued as a result of this change. Aside from that, all fees are remaining the same, and it is the same fees that have been in place now for about 12 years, a little more. And lastly, I'll just mention that because we are not the only state that is involved with this problem, Senator Shaheen has a bill that's moving forward at the federal level that we hope will remedy this issue for all of us, including the other states, But in the meantime, this is going to need to be our solution to meet federal requirements. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. That was a mouthful coming at you, so I apologize.
Any questions? It seems pretty straightforward, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for your time.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1304? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on 1304. Thank you. Are you good? Okay. We will now open the hearing on House Bill 1468, and the chair will call on Representative Smith. Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senators. My name is Representative Jonathan Smith. I represent the great people of Ossipee in Carroll County District 5. I am also the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. The bill as amended before you, actually, each one of you should have received this packet. I'll just give you a quick history of the rail line we're talking about before I actually get into the bill. If you open up this packet, you'll see a brief written testimony on my behalf, plus dozens and dozens of written testimony from citizens in support of the bill, including the towns of Tamworth and Madison, including the Ossipee Valley Snowmobile Club. On the left side of the folder, you'll see a brief history of the rail line that we're discussing. It's about a 20-mile stretch that the state owned. They got ownership back 20 years ago. And the rail trail area we're discussing is on the last page on the left side. It runs from Center Ossipee Moultonville Road up to Route 113 in Madison. It comprises about 10 miles. So I've been working with a group called FORT, Friends of Ossipee Rail Trail, for many years as a selectman and as a state representative, trying to revitalize the downtown area of Ossipee. Downtown Ossipee obviously suffered just like Route 66. When Route 16 bypassed it, the downtown suffered. This rail bed sits unutilized. There hasn't been trains on it since the 70s. The tracks as they currently sit are unusable. The ties are rotten. Bridges aren't up to standard. To get this to be an actual train line in the future at some point is going to be multi in the tens of millions of dollars, as North Coast Railroad testified to the House. I just also want to add, this bill has strong bipartisan support. It passed the House on voice vote twice. It came out of Finance 23-2. So there is strong support for this going forward. So Friends of Ossipee Rail Trail has been working with DOT for a few years to try to be able to just walk on it, try to open it up for recreation of all kinds. And basically, it's gotten nowhere. So literally, in a dream, the night before the filing period closed for an LSR, I woke up that morning and said, holy cow, I can do something here. Let me put in a bill to try to move this along since DOT wasn't doing anything. Hence, you see the original bill with the amendment as passed. So the bill as it sits is to create a working group, which will have 3 meetings if this became law between now and January 2nd, 2025. That working group will consist of executive counsel from District 1, a member of the House Public Works Committee, a member of the Senate Capital Budget Committee, a selectman or their appointed agents from the towns of Ossipee and Madison, and a representative from the New Hampshire North Coast Railroad to formulate a plan to basically, what could we do with this 10 miles of rail bed? So what we're looking to do is remove the rails, use that money to basically just make a flat level surface that people can walk, ride bikes, jog, hike, still be used for snowmobiles. The Snowmobile Club is ecstatic about this idea because the tracks right now are a hazard to snowmobiles because unless there's enough snow, the tracks get hooked within the rails themselves and people actually crash, and some people have died over the years due to that hazard. So this really is just about letting the people walk. It'll connect it actually will connect Tamworth also, which is in between. There is a letter of support from them in there. It's about connecting these three towns. It'll just bring economic activity and vitality to the downtown area, and the people really want it. And I will take any questions. Oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. There was a study done by UNH on this particular section of track. I could pass this along. I only did one copy, which talks about the benefits of what this would do to the towns in the surrounding area. So I can pass this.
Any questions from the committee members? Senator Ward?
That is correct. North Coast Railroad, who was doing an upgrade, they run the tracks from Ossipee South, Boston Sand and Gravel, all the way to Boston. And that has quite a bit of value in that steel scrap. And again, all we're going to need to do is remove those, put down some gravel where it needs, because a lot of the cross ties now are actually buried because they've been in the ground so long. They'll stay, some of them will get removed, and just smooth and level the areas where it needs to be. So it wouldn't be a big expense. The fiscal note, I don't know if I already said it, is under $10,000 for this.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Sounds really good.
Yep, thank you.
The chair will now call Representative McConkey. Again, nice to have you back.
Thank you. Record, Mark McConkey, Carroll County 8, Town of Ospey is not in my district. I raised my family in Ospey. My heart's in Ospey. That's where my kids all went to school. I want to build on the enthusiasm, Madam Chairman, on this project here. So I believe the working group is tremendous. It's the right group of people. This came through Public Works and Highways. It passed unanimous out of Public Works and Highways. There was always some confusion. Is this a rail trail program? It is not. It is simply just removing rails where possible and creating a level surface so people can walk. In the future, if this trail group or others want to formalize this beyond that, they're more than welcome to. The division of trails is ecstatic because so much of this rail right now is hazardous to run snowmobiles on, and they're actually having to find easements on property alongside of it to run the snowmobiles so that it has better use. Happy to take any questions enthusiastically as you are in support of this.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your enthusiastic testimony. Okay, the chair will now call Andre. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Boy, I hate to be the Grinch on all this enthusiasm. I also am enthusiastic about rail trails. We, in the Department of Transportation, have several rail trail projects ongoing at any given time, converting state-owned rail corridors to rail trails. We are advocates of it. In this particular case, we're neutral on this legislation. The only reason we can't be supportive is two factors. Number one is the utilization of the rail itself to fund this effort is problematic in our view. We require any time rail is lifted from state-owned rail corridors, we need that rail to maintain our existing active rail. There's differences between 115-pound rail, 85-pound rail. It's very difficult to acquire 85-pound rail. This is the type of rail that we take up in these circumstances. So in order to maintain our active rail line, we definitely would be inclined to retain that rail. We don't see it as a way to fund this project necessarily. We're certainly open to studying everything, and that's what this legislation urges us to do, is to work with the communities and study this. And we're certainly willing to do that, wouldn't cut off that conversation. Whenever something like this comes up, though, I will point out that perceptions of the community on any DOT project, and we understand, if a community advocates, whether it's a road project, a rail project, an airport project, if things aren't moving fast enough, there's a perception of DOT not doing anything. We would just say that we have multiple rail trails under development right now, and little thing called the pandemic happened in between. We are holding off on an RFP on active use of this rail because of this study. Now, there are other things to do with rail, active rail, than simply trains. There's also tourist rail cars, and there are several companies that we have indications would be interested in bidding on this particular project. Now, those two things don't necessarily have to preclude the other. You can have on-rail recreational use while you also have trail use. We understand that snowmobiles, as a recreational user of our corridors, would prefer that the rail be removed. That's something we can talk about and study. But certainly, we are eager to work with the community and look at this effort. And I would not be doing my job if I didn't point out, whenever rail trails come up, that while we are enthusiastic advocates of rail trails, primarily we're the Department of Transportation. Sometimes a rail trail could be active transportation, sometimes it's purely recreation. In the cases where it's purely recreation, we are not funded to maintain these trails. It was brought up earlier by another speaker that there are multiple culverts and bridges along this corridor that aren't doing great. That's true. When a community group or a local community volunteers to help construct a rail trail or help defray costs, that there is no community in our state that's funded to the extent that it can replace some of these large bridge structures and culverts. That ultimately will have to be paid by the people of this state and by the Department of Transportation, and we are simply not funded for it. So this is an ongoing issue that's identified by our statewide rail trail plan, that ongoing maintenance of these transportation assets is something the state needs to take a look at and be interested in, because as of now, there is no budget line for it. And once a bridge or a culvert goes, it's gone. And these rail trails just get severed and they have to be shut down, which is a shame. So we are certainly advocates of future funding to actually maintain these corridors as well after we set them up. And I'm open for any questions.
Senator Gendro?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Andre, for taking my question. You're probably very familiar with the rail trail in Littleton.
Yes.
Okay, so how does this differ? That's where I'm from. It's my district. And you had made a comment about sometimes when the state is involved, it seems like it's so slow. It felt like it took forever
Sure.
to do that. But I know initially you allowed private contractors to take up the ties, the railroad ties, and that was used as part of the reimbursement or pay.
It can be, and there certainly part or some of the ties that we deem no longer serviceable can be salvaged for scrap.
Okay, so how is this 10-mile section similar and yet different from the one in Littleton?
And I would have to go back and look at the way Littleton was categorized. I don't have that off the tip of my tongue, but if I'm to guess, most of these segments are what we call Class 1 rail or below, which limits the speed of any train that could actually operate on it. In this particular case, as was identified, it's probably not even up to Class 1 standards right now. So it's correct to say that if we were ever to use it for active rail use, there would have to be significant investment in the corridor. This is a problem we have statewide, right? That it becomes very difficult even to maintain some of our active rail corridors to Class 1 standards, which basically limits a train to almost walking speed. And you see some of our freight lines have to operate extremely slowly on our corridors because it limits, you have to maintain a certain number of ties in a compact area or a defined area in order to maintain a Class 1 status. I couldn't really identify anything different other than to say I guess the vision of this project is not a fully developed rail trail at this time. It's more just taking the track out, which of course makes it less expensive at the moment to remove track because you're not actually preparing it for a rail trail bed. We have standards associated with that and drainage and such. But it's fairly novel in that regard, I would say. But, you know, this is something that could come out in the study. And again, we're eager to assist the community in studying the feasibility of what they want to do.
Thank you. Yeah. So the other interesting thing is with the Littleton Trail, of course, it can connect up to Bethlehem and Whitefield, which is ongoing, but there are no motorized vehicles allowed on that. Snowmobiles, because it's in the winter, but during the summer months, no motorized vehicles. But it's heavily used, and I'm excited that Ossipee is going to have this opportunity to experience it. Well, it's used a lot, and we're very grateful for it.
We're extremely optimistic about the connectivity of our statewide rail trail. The statewide rail trail plan, as I said, that we published last year, talks about interconnectedness with the Eastern Seaboard Rail Trail that's almost nearing completion, and obviously other states like Vermont and Maine also plugging into that. So it's a wonderful recreational asset for the state, and it can drive tourism. We've seen it in other states, and we are very supportive of it with our friends at the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. They more properly, I would say, run or should run some of those corridors. Even though we're the underlying owner, we retain rail development rights. We partner with them, and our plan for the future is for them to maintain and actually run more and more of these corridors that are used for strictly recreational use.
Very much so. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for the members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Bradley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Jeb Bradley from Wolfboro, just here to add my 2 cents worth. A lot of hard work has been done by local residents to get the bill this far. I think passing this bill would enable that work to continue. I think, as Senator Gendro indicated in your line of questioning, there is a huge asset for the state of New Hampshire in these recreational trails. So I'm just here to stick up for, the people that have worked hard in the Ossipee area, and hope we can pass the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bradley. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Chair will now recognize Phil. Good afternoon and welcome.
We go. And I represent both the Ossipee Economic Development Council. I'm chairman of FORT that Representative Smith talked about, and I'm a longtime resident and business owner in Ossipee. Simply put, we need this trail. Ossipee, as Representative Smith said, is, I hate to say it, a depressed area right now, Center Ossipee. When 16 came in, Center Ossipee went away. When I was a kid, I remember in the 60s, my dad would come up. We had a house on the lake, and my dad would come up by train. Would meet him at the station on the weekends. He'd spend the weekend, and then my mother and my sister and I would stay there for the rest of the week, and he'd go home. There's a lot of people that say it'd be wonderful to have a train come through Ossipee again. It would be, but there was a study done that's been mentioned in 2004. It basically said these rails have to come up. There's 16 rail crossings on this section of road, of this section of rail, where it crosses the highway. We all have been on Route 16. Can you imagine Route 16 with a train on a Friday night? What that's going to do to traffic? It's just not practical. As far as the trail in the town is concerned, we started the group 5 years ago. at which point we contacted DOT with a simple request that said, hey, we'd like to be able to walk. The town of Ossipee, the people, would like to be able to walk on this section of trail. It's right in the center of town. There's a couple of little restaurants right there. There's a big parking lot that the town manages. We'd like to walk on it. They came back with an answer that said, you can't walk on it right now. You'll have to wait for an RFP that comes out. That was 2019. We waited. We had the pandemic, yes. We contacted them during that time. We were told pandemic, things have postponed. We contacted them again in 21, got the same thing. RFP is coming out. 22, an RFP is coming out. In 23, Chris Elliott and I, who are part of Fort, went to the New Hampshire DOT, the trail conference in Concord. We had a side meeting with DOT at that time, and we were told we were days away from getting an RFP out, where people could, voice their opinion of and any desire to develop something. We're still waiting. Nothing happened. I think one of the things I'm also is an avid bike rider. I've traveled all around this country to ride rail trails. I've done there's a trail in New York called the Erie Canal Trail that goes from Buffalo to Albany. Fantastic trail. Traveled out to there, rode the whole trail. It's about 300 something miles. Amazing what it's done to the little towns. There's little towns, all these little towns, bike shops, coffee stops. People use this as transportation. This is a tourist attraction. I've done the Gap Trail that goes from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, all the way down to Washington, D.C. I've done the Katy Trail, which is in Missouri. Again, going through depressed areas, small towns that have been revitalized. Rail trails do this, right? This is an asset in Ossipee that goes through Madison, Silver Lake, all these little towns. There's a way to connect these. They're developing all sorts of rail trails in North Conway that are eventually going to be connected into Maine. This would be a spur. This could potentially be a spur into there, letting tourists. I mean, it's something that this town needs. You saw the feasibility study that was done by sponsored by the Economic Development Council, paid for by the town of Ossipee, and a lot of thought went into that to develop what this rail trail would do to the town. I think everybody has probably said it. We need this. It would be a huge help to the town, a huge asset to the town. It's just sitting there. It's never going to be a train. It's just sitting there. So let's do. And then I realize that there's funding issues, but if you look around the country, the rail trails are popping up everywhere, and you see the assets that they become to the town, and the funding. We'll figure it out. All right. Thank you. Any questions?
Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. The chair will recognize Dr. Bob. Thank you. I didn't want to say it wrong.
Or caboose, if you want to do a rail trail to it. So I get the back cleanup. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that are already said. I was really thrilled to hear in Littleton the benefit of the local community. As a representative and director of the Ossipee Chamber of Commerce, I'm here today to lend support to this bill. Visualize we're sitting on Route 16 and the railroad signs go down, the red light's going on, and you're sitting there and you're waiting for the train. I'll call it the no decision train yet. That's what this bill is trying to do, is to get us the decision. We've been sitting, waiting while the bells and the whistles have been going since 2019, it's time to make a decision. And what this bill does, in our view, it helps us either move forward or try something else. I think what the chamber would like to see, and this legislation starts to do it, is let's get to yes. Let's try to, what can we do and how can we do it without, and I'll call it bureaucratic bungling. No, it's bridling. To me, it's been bridled. It hasn't been allowed to flourish. We come here and we argue these, but the people who have to make the decisions with us haven't made these decisions yet. The importance to the chamber is not only the economic, but the health and welfare of our community. We're an aging community. More of us are retired. We're living there. We have to find things to do without driving 50 miles to do it. I'm very involved in one of the things that the chamber supports at the park. And our Constitution Park, in the last 3 years, with the support of these two gentlemen behind me, has been so important to us because we're able to put things in that were never there before. We have a proposal before the CDFA for $300,000 to rebuild a boardwalk so people of all ages and abilities can get down to see our lake. Well, sitting on the other side of 16 is this beautiful trail, a rail, that we're not even allowed to walk on, which it makes no sense. And if you talk to the average local community member and talk about the trains are coming back, they'll say the old man in the mountain will come back before the trains come back. So let's call the hand today. I think we support this bill and let's make a decision. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1468? Please come forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Daniel Day. I live in Durham, and I actually have a commercial interest in the Conway branch, and I can think of another 3 or 4 people who do. Railroads are coming back. We have no shortage of rail trails in New Hampshire, but we actually do have quite a shortage of available track in New Hampshire, and this is limiting railroad companies the ability to enter business in the Granite State. So I'm one of the people who is awaiting the RFP that the DOT has said they would release in the near future, and I did get confirmation from the department that the RFP is on hold because of this bill, and this is just delaying any future development opportunities along this line. My proposal would be an economic development driver for the area. It would be an opportunity for the state to generate some revenue, and so I would encourage you, instead of directing a committee to talk about removing some infrastructure, which is now in demand, to direct the DOT to release the RFP and see what opportunities we have to return these rails to service. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll ask again, is there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1468?
I've got a question maybe that Andre could help me with.
Go ahead.
Andre. Yeah, thank you, Madam
And
Chair.
I'm sorry for the record. I don't know if I introduced myself earlier. So Andre Briere, Deputy Commissioner, DOT.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I know, going back to Littleton, I know we were told too, because I'm thinking about Daniel's comment, we were told that even though the tracks were all taken up, the steel taken up, that the state still maintains the fact that they can forever put the train back or put the track back. Now, do I have that correct?
You do.
Okay.
You do. Yeah, we retain the ability to construct track along these corridors in perpetuity. It's the way we, that we maintain the underlying ownership of the corridor. Now that's theoretical. In reality, yes, it would be extremely expensive to construct track on any of the corridors that we actually remove track from.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1468? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on 1468. Just so everybody knows, we're not going to exec any bills today because Senator Waters isn't here. But I anticipate next Tuesday having an executive session on some of these bills. So I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor to adjourn? Aye. Seeing none opposed, we are now adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for